Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Miana Lynn Watt, and this is the video on how I healed from the trauma of molestation. Now, if you haven't watched the video of me telling my story, I would highly suggest watching that video first so you can have a better understanding of what this video is about. I'll put the link in the description so that you can have easy access to it. And in this video, I will be talking about some of the traumas that I had to heal, some of the things that I was attached to, and also the understanding I had to come to, and a lot of the acceptance I had to experience on this journey. This was not an overnight process. The full-on healing of this actually took years. I also want to give the disclaimer that the gist of healing is understanding. So a lot of the questions I had to ask myself, a lot of the things I had to go to the God within me to ask were very blunt answers and truth. And what I had to do was accept that truth. I'll be touching on some of the trauma caused, like low self-worth, self-sacrifice, codependency, attachment to sex, and shame and fear surrounding my body. I'm going to start with self-sacrifice. This is the very first trauma that I could remember where I endured self-sacrifice. It showed me how to stay silent through pain and suffering for the sake of others and to accept pain as a normality. And next, I'm going to touch on self-worth. Not feeling worthy enough to not be hurt by men and accepting pain as a part of the package as long as I had their attention in some kind of way. And then we have body shame and fear surrounding my body. I remember as a kid being so scared that I had an STD, even though I wasn't having sex yet and I wasn't even penetrated, but what he was doing to me could very well so cause an STD. So I just was scared that I had one all the time, watching TV, hearing about STDs on TV. HIV was a big thing on TV, like talked about on TV. So I always was scared that I had it. And especially going to middle school, being in sex education class, I was really scared that I had an STD. I didn't, but it created this fear around my body. And even being young and a young teenager, and when my mom would take me to the doctor, I would just be so scared. Codependency. Constantly looking for somebody to care for me and somebody to care for. Let's care for each other all the time and be around each other all the time. Just searching for love outside of myself, needing somebody to be attached to. Me feeling like my mom should have been able to look at me and tell. And of course, when I went on my healing journey, that became unrealistic. I realized that. But it also left me searching for a mother figure outside of her, especially around the ages 19, 20, and 21. That's around the time my closest sibling passed away, and he was really my protector. And so at that time, I really started to look for a mother figure out, really just love, period, outside of myself. And along with all of those things, my attachment to sex. Now, consider it to have been an attachment instead of an addiction. It's not something that I needed every day, multiple times a day, not even every week. I just needed someone to have it with. I just needed someone to be available for when I wanted to have sex. Whether it was I was dealing with somebody in a situationship for 6 months or I was in a relationship, I just needed a person to have sex with when I wanted to have sex. And this is because sexual activity had been a part of my life since I was a young child. And so it was a normal thing to me. It was like, it has to be a part of my life at all times. I had no real belief behind it. I had no real connection to what it was actually for until I started to heal. So now I'll be talking about the journey of my healing. My healing journey started around 2013, 2014. At that time, I was between 23 and 24, and I had a bad car accident, and it set me down. I didn't have a car for 6 months, so it was a time in my life where I was really able to reflect. It was similar to like COVID, but it was my own thing that I was experiencing, where I was in the house a lot and just really reflecting on my life. I feel like that's the time that I did a lot of my healing, not just about this, but I really developed my relationship with God at that time. I had to address the parts of God that are in me in order to get these answers. I asked myself, why did this happen to me? Now, this was a question I asked myself as a young kid and teenager during the molestation. Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? But this time I knew that I would get answers. It was just something in me that knew this was different. And the answer was me thinking about other people in the world and that I knew and that I didn't know, stories that I heard that were much worse than what I had experienced. I wasn't the only person on the planet that went through something horrible. Then I asked myself, why did he specifically do this to me? I thought about everything that I knew about him, the household he grew up in, the parents he had, the foundation of his home, how different that foundation was from the home that I was raised in the majority of the time. It also came down to a lack of morals, a lack of guidance, a lack of love. So many of us grew up in these type of households and it was deemed normal. Dysfunction was normal to us. And aside from that, I wasn't the only one he did this to. And I was younger, smaller, weaker, less aware. Another reason why this happened to me has a lot to do with cycles and curses. We are really here to break cycles and curses that our ancestors in those generations before us could not break. Now, this is something I was not going to put in this video, but after having a conversation with God, I know that I have to. So this is how molestation shows up on both my mother and father's side of the family. My mother was 14 years old when she had her first child, which is my oldest brother who has passed away. My dad was 19 at the time. So she was a 14-year-old girl having a child with a 19-year-old adult. And so a few years ago, I asked her, I said, that was pedophilia. I said, nobody said anything. And she was like, no. So in her mind, she was just having a baby young. It was very common. She had a baby young and that was her life, survival mode. But really, that was a problem. To add, I do not think my dad had the insight to know that was wrong. I had to think about that generation and how he grew up, the things I knew about him growing up, and the things I know about my mother growing up. Whatever you don't heal, whatever traumas you don't heal, will resurface, whether it's through your children, just in your bloodline, through your friendships, through your relationships, period. Whatever isn't healed or acknowledged will resurface. So my decision to press charges was way bigger than I thought it was at the time. This was to end this for generations to come. Whether on their end it will be so no one else has to go to jail. And on my end, it will end the mental trauma and the physical trauma of this. Either way, it ends. And to touch on cycles and curses again, for his end, him being in jail and receiving that type of time is the karma for the masculine. I had to also tell my mother's story, even if there's shame or embarrassment behind it, because it revives the strength and the courage and the power and the voice of the feminine energy. A lot of women are shamed or guilted out of telling their story, so it goes swept under the rug, and they deal with these traumas and hold and carry these traumas, and no one cares. Now I want to touch on the lack of guidance and morals and values. A lot of our parents experienced some form of sexual trauma. And at times when it didn't feel right, it was swept under the rug. So this created this secrecy behind sex. All kids know is not to do it and that they may get in trouble for doing it. It's a child's place mentality. Now, when children are asking questions, best believe they are ready for the answers. Children are born ready. We underestimate them the second that they're born, but they're born ready for this world. These questions going unanswered leaves kids extremely curious. So they're either left to become even more curious or wonder and figure it out for themselves. And on top of that, the way society is set up is sex is just viewed as this pleasurable act when really it's what we use to create life and procreate. And there's purpose behind that. Before condoms and abortions and contraceptives, Humans just created life, whether they knew how important that was or not. So instead of growing up hearing that sex is a sacred exchange of energy, we grew up hearing don't do it and don't get pregnant. We didn't grow up learning that intimacy is a very special exchange and what it means to be attracted to someone, and the difference between being physically attracted to someone and actually knowing and liking who they are. And with all these things that we weren't taught, that's where understanding comes in, because our teachers, our parents, they themselves didn't know this, considering the generation that they came from. And not saying all of the people from that generation were like this or came from that. I just know a lot of this occurred or took place. We talking late 60s, 70s, 80s, crack epidemic, okay? Now I ain't gonna get too deep into that, but this is the generation we're speaking of. These were the babies that were being raised during that time. And that's one of the spaces where understanding comes in. Moving on to another question I had to ask myself. I asked myself, why did this happen to me for so long? And the answer is because I didn't tell for so long. Now, when I tell people that in talking about my story, they're like, oh, you were a kid. This is not your fault. You know, you didn't know this happened to you. Yes, I understand that. But had I told sooner, it would have stopped sooner. So even if that means I had to go back and forgive my younger self and say, hey, you didn't know that telling sooner would stop this sooner. You didn't know the trauma it would cause you in your life. You didn't know these things. I forgive you for not knowing. And that I'm fine with that. Had to tell my younger self, it's okay. Things are different now. You're in a safe space now, and look at what it taught you. I asked myself, why did my father hire a lawyer for his son who did this to his daughter? On top of this being his son, this was not about him. This was more so about the mother of his son. The woman who had the bulk of his children, 12 children by him. The woman who stayed by his side no matter how many outside kids he had. I had a vision of her telling him, you need to do something. Now, I don't know if that's real or not, but that's what came to me in the midst of my healing. And this was not about protecting him. This was about him showing up for her. He couldn't live with the consequences of not showing up for her in this manner. No matter how many times he didn't show up for her before, this right here, he couldn't live with the consequences of not showing up. It's like she would have never forgiven him if he didn't take some sort of action. I honestly don't think he cared about my brother as much as he cared about my brother's mother. I also asked why she, as a mother, as a woman, couldn't show empathy or sympathy for what happened to me. I thought about the things that I heard about her growing up. Whether they were true or not, it matched with why she wouldn't be able to sympathize or empathize with me coming forward about this. I asked why my father had a lack of concern for his daughter. I looked at his relationships with women, his mother, the mothers of his children, and his daughters, and none of them were great or grand. And so this was not personal to me. What him not showing up for me was not personal. None of his relationships with women were great. So while he showed up for my brother's mother in this particular situation, there were plenty of times where he didn't. And so I couldn't take this personal as a female or as his child. Although I had countless amount of visits to his house, he wasn't there consistently. So physically and guidance wise, none of his children really had him more than the other. Maybe the other children had seen him more that lived in that house, but keep in mind this is the same house that the abuse took place in. So there was no special treatment to any of his children. I had to ask myself, why would my siblings get on that stand and testify against me and defend a lie? I chunked it up to the same answer as to why he would do this to me in the first place, and it was just a lack of guidance, morals, and values. A couple years after the trial, I did talk to one of my siblings, and she told me that my dad gave them an ultimatum, which was, you either do this or you won't have a place to live. So that was that. That pretty much sums up my healing journey in regards to molestation. Now, there are some other things that I want to touch on, like some of these comments that were left on the video of me telling my story. You should see them on the screen now. I want to give these people who are hiding and making fake profiles and channels to come at me and call me a liar. I want to give them the exposure that they are seeking, that they're looking for. And I've also decided to pin these comments. What they don't know is that they will find more peace in accountability. They will find more peace in the truth. I understand that they are embarrassed and ashamed, more so for people that are seeing this, that know me and know us. I get that. But what you won't do is guilt me out of this truth. This is not about you. This is not about protecting you. This is not about demeaning you. This is about purpose. And if I were afraid of anything that you were saying in these comments and any type of liar you were calling me, I would have never done this video and I would take it down immediately. Especially the comment saying that he's not my real father. I need to find who my real father is. Him being my father is not a flex when he didn't even show up for me. And that's not me being angry at that. I'm just saying that's not a flex. Now, as far as the shame and the embarrassment that you're experiencing, had y'all showed up to this situation different, the trajectory of it will be different. It will be me still telling the story, but it will be my dad showed up for me and protected me. And who did this to me? Their mother protected me as a little girl and as a female. So, what I will say is, what you may not know is that you'll find more peace and accountability. Sometimes that requires for you to acknowledge what you didn't know growing up, where you come from, what happened with you in your life. Hiding behind fake channels and calling me a liar is easy, but me showing my face and doing this is not. And I'm still doing it, and I'm going to continue to do it. Even with all of that, change is available. So the fact that I've already forgiven my dad and his side of the family, I don't need them to apologize to me. I don't need them to stand behind me for me to do that. It's been done already. I've already come to this understanding. Change is available. God could do anything. So you never know. They might own up to this one day and say, you know what? I'm ready to lift up off of this lie and free myself, because that's where the true peace will be. It will release the shame and the guilt, and it will also change that way that you don't want people to see you. It will change that. Standing up for what's right and being noble will change that. So that is the end of this video, and I will be doing plenty more videos like this, not on this topic. This topic is done. It's a done deal. I don't have to speak on it on here anymore, but there will be other topics as far as my growth. If you know someone that has gone through this and you think that this video will help them, please share it with them. My goal is to share my growth and my healing. And until next time, be loved.